The scent of salt and vinegar, crisps a desperate gnawing need at 3 a.m., was the first casualty. Julian sprawled on his side of their acre-sized bed, had merely chuckled a low, dismissive rumble. "Darling, you're pregnant, not possessed." Serafina had forced a smile then. But as weeks bled into months, his laughter became a weapon, each craving a new target for his derision. The pickles with ice cream, the smoked oysters with mango salsa, even her sudden obsession with the aroma of rain-soaked earth. He thought her whims were hilarious. He wouldn't be laughing when the crisp, embossed paper landed in his hand, smelling not of cravings, but of court. The penthouse apartment on the 78th floor of 1 Dalton Street in Boston was Serafina's gilded cage, though she hadn't always seen it that way. When she married Julian Thorne, CEO of Thorne Industries, a global tech empire, she'd been swept into a whirlwind of opulence she'd only read about in magazines. He was charming, devastatingly handsome, and exuded a confidence that bordered on arrogance, a trait she initially found captivating. Their first 2 years were a carefully curated montage of exclusive parties, spontaneous trips to Monaco on their private jet, and philanthropic galas where their smiles were as dazzling as the diamonds adorning Serafina's neck. Julian loved the image of them, the power couple, effortlessly elegant, eternally adored. Serafina, an art curator with a keen eye and a gentle disposition, had genuinely loved him, or at least the man he'd presented himself to be. The news of her pregnancy was at first received with apparent joy. Julian had arranged a lavish dinner at their favorite Michelin-starred restaurant, L'Espalier, before its unfortunate closure, a memory they both cherished for different reasons, now toasting to the next Thorne heir. Serafina, her heart swelling with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, had believed they were embarking on a beautiful new chapter. The cravings started subtly. A sudden intense desire for green olives, which she'd always disliked. Julian found it amusing. "Look at you, Sophie, your body's already playing tricks on you." He'd said it with a smile ruffling her hair. But then came the craving for cheap instant ramen noodles, the kind she'd survived on during her less glamorous university days. They were in their state-of-the-art kitchen, a gleaming expanse of stainless steel and marble that probably cost more than her parents' entire house. Julian, dressed in a bespoke suit, even on a Saturday morning, watched her rummage through the imported Italian pastas and organic grains. "What on earth are you looking for, darling?" he'd asked, sipping his freshly pressed kale and spirulina juice. "Just ramen," she mumbled, her cheeks flushing. "The really basic kind." His perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. "Ramen? You mean that sodium-laden student food? Surely you're joking. I can have Chef Antoine whip you up a consommé, or perhaps some fresh lobster bisque. No, I really want ramen," she insisted, feeling inexplicably small. He chuckled, a sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. "All right, Sophie Ramen. Don't go developing a taste for the gutter, will you? Think of the baby's palate." He walked away, still chuckling, leaving her standing alone in the vast kitchen, the craving now tinged with a bitter taste of shame. This became a pattern, her yearning for a specific brand of dill pickles. Vlasic kosher dills, which their gourmet grocery store didn't stock, was met with, "Can't you just have the artisanal cornichons, Serafina?" "Must you be so pedestrian?" When she craved a particular type of fried chicken from a fast food chain she hadn't eaten in years, he'd recoiled in mock horror. "My dear, the grease, the trans fats. Think of our child's cellular development." He'd then proceed to call his personal chef, to prepare an organic pan-seared chicken breast with quinoa salad, completely missing the point. It wasn't just the food. It was the way he said it, the subtle curl of his lip. The laughter that made her feel foolish, as if her body's natural, albeit sometimes bizarre demands during pregnancy were a personal failing, a blemish on their otherwise perfect facade. His amusement was a shield deflecting any attempt Serafina made to explain how real, how visceral these cravings were. Ananya, Serafina's older sister, a pragmatic lawyer who had always been wary of Julian's smooth exterior, noticed the shift during their weekly video calls. "You seem tired, Sarah," Ananya observed one afternoon, her brow furrowed with concern. Serafina was listlessly pushing a piece of fruit around her plate. And not just first trimester tired. "Is Julian being supportive?" Serafina picked at a loose thread on her cashmere cardigan. Julian. He thinks my craving for Fruit Loops with melted cheese is a sign I'm losing my mind." Ananya blinked. "Fruit Loops with melted cheese. Okay, that one's a bit out there even for pregnancy cravings, but still, his job is to get you the Fruit Loops and the cheese, not psychoanalyze you." He just laughs, Ananya. He makes a joke out of it. "Last night I woke up wanting the smell of old books and damp soil. I know it's weird, but it was so strong. He told me I should write a horror novel instead of gestating his child." Her voice trembled slightly. "That's not funny, Sarah. That's belittling. He says he's just trying to keep things light, that I'm being overly sensitive because of the hormones." Ah, the classic, "your hormonal dismissal." Convenient, isn't it? Ananya's voice was laced with sarcasm. "Is he like this about other things? The doctor's appointments? The nursery plans?" Serafina hesitated. Julian always sent his personal assistant, a briskly efficient woman named Portia, with her, to appointments if he couldn't make it, which was often. He'd approved the renowned interior designer's plans for the nursery, a symphony of gender-neutral creams and imported French antiques, with a cursory glance and a "looks suitably expensive, well done." "He's busy," Serafina defended weakly. "Thorn Industries is launching a new satellite network. It's a very demanding time." "Having a baby is demanding too, Serafina. He's a co-participant, remember? Not just a sperm donor with a black Amex." The conversation left Serafina feeling uneasy. Was she being too sensitive? Or was Julian's laughter a symptom of a deeper disregard, a crack in the foundation of their supposedly idyllic life? The penthouse, once a symbol of their shared success and love, was beginning to feel more like a beautiful soundproof room where her voice and her increasingly desperate cravings were swallowed by the opulence, unheard and unheeded. The laughter, she was starting to realize, wasn't affectionate teasing. It was the sound of her significance slowly eroding. The second trimester, often hailed as the honeymoon phase of pregnancy, brought Serafina a brief respite from nausea, but no reprieve from Julian's casual cruelty. Her cravings, if anything, intensified in their specificity, and to Julian, their absurdity. One week it was an unshakable desire for the cheapest bright orange processed cheese slices eaten straight from the plastic wrapper. The next it was an almost painful yearning for the scent of her grandmother's rose garden, a place thousands of miles and a lifetime away. "Processed cheese, darling," Julian would say, his voice dripping with mock concern, as he hosted a dinner party for his business associates, all of whom wore expressions of polite amusement. "Are we trying to cultivate a future connoisseur of artificial flavors? Perhaps we should invest in a craft factory instead of that vineyard in Napa." His guests would chuckle, and Serafina would feel her cheeks burn, forcing a smile that felt like a grimace. He seemed to particularly enjoy performing his mockery for an audience. Alone, he was often just dismissive, too engrossed in his phone or a market report to pay her much mind. But with friends or colleagues present, her cravings became his favorite comedic material. One Saturday, Serafina woke with an overwhelming need for a very particular type of pastry. A Cohen Aman from a small artisanal bakery called Le Petit Grenier in a town near where she'd attended university. It was flaky, buttery, caramelized, and the memory of it was so vivid, so urgent, it made her stomach ache with longing. "Julian," she began, her voice tentative, as he was orchestrating a complex financial deal over a video conference in his home office, a room that hummed with the quiet power of global commerce. He muted his call, spinning in his ergonomic chair. "Yes, Serafina. Is it urgent? I'm just about to close a rather significant merger. I know this is a long shot, and it's probably silly, but I have this incredible craving for a Cohen Aman from Le Petit Grenier. It's near Worrell University." Julian stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he threw his head back and laughed, a loud, booming sound that echoed in the minimalist space. "Le Petit Grenier, a 3-hour drive for a pastry. Serafina, you are truly outdoing yourself. What's next? A specific pebble from a beach in Bali. A single perfectly ripe mango from a particular tree in the Amazon rainforest." He unmuted his call. "Apologies, gentlemen. My wife seems to be confusing pregnancy with a particularly elaborate scavenger hunt designed by a madman." He winked at the camera, then muted it again, his laughter subsiding into a condescending smile. "Darling, be reasonable. I'll have Portia order you every pastry available from the finest patisseries in Boston, Dominique Ansel perhaps, or something from Flower Bakery they deliver." "It's not the same," Serafina whispered, tears pricking her eyes. It wasn't just the pastry, it was the dismissal. The complete lack of understanding that these cravings weren't whimsical desires, but profound, almost physiological needs. It was the feeling of being utterly alone in this transformative experience. "Hormones, darling," he said dismissively, turning back to his screen. "They do make one rather irrational." The tears spilled over, then hot and silent. She retreated to their bedroom, the vast, impersonal space, feeling colder than ever. She curled up on the chaise lounge, overlooking the city skyline, a panorama of success and ambition that felt utterly alien to the turmoil within her. Later that week, Ananya visited. She took one look at Serafina's pale face and the shadows under her eyes, and her expression hardened. "He's still at it, isn't he?" Ananya asked, her voice low and angry as she unpacked a container of homemade chicken soup. Serafina's childhood comfort food. Serafina nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She recounted the Cohen Aman incident, her voice thick with unshed tears. Ananya listened, her jaw tightening. "Sarah, this isn't just about weird food combinations anymore. This is about respect, or his complete lack of it. He's systematically undermining you, making you feel small and foolish. It's emotional abuse dressed up as light-hearted banter." "Abuse?" Serafina flinched. The word felt too harsh, too definitive for Julian, her husband, the father of her child. "He says he loves me. He provides everything. Providing everything materially doesn't give him a pass to destroy you emotionally, especially not now." Ananya retorted, her gaze sharp. "Think about it. Does he ever validate your feelings? Does he ever genuinely ask how you are and listen, really listen, to the answer? Or is it always about how your needs, your very normal pregnancy experiences, inconvenience or amuse him? Serafina thought back. Julian's questions about her well-being were usually perfunctory, asked while scrolling through emails or heading out the door. Her answers, if they deviated from fine, were often met with a solution that involved throwing money at the problem. A spa day, a new piece of jewelry, a suggestion to talk to Portia about it. Genuine connection, the kind she craved almost as much as the strange foods was absent. "He makes me feel like I'm a burden," Serafina admitted, the words tasting like ash. "Like this baby, our baby, is just an extension of his legacy, and my role is to be a flawless, uncomplaining vessel." "And what happens when the baby comes, Sarah?" Ananya pressed gently. "When you're sleep-deprived and overwhelmed, and the baby is crying at 3 a.m. Is he going to laugh then too? Tell you you're being hormonal when you're suffering from postpartum depression?" The image Ananya painted was stark and terrifying. Serafina had envisioned motherhood as a partnership, a shared journey. But Julian's behavior was painting a very different picture, one where she would be isolated. Her struggles minimized her emotional well-being, an afterthought. "He booked a baby moon for us next month," Serafina said, trying to inject a hopeful note. "A week at the Amangiri in Utah. He said it's to help me relax before the real work begins." Ananya looked skeptical. "Is it for you, Sarah? Or is it for the optics?" Another perfect Instagram post of the happy, wealthy couple awaiting their perfect child. "Will he be present with you or on his laptop by the pool, making deals and occasionally glancing up to tell you your swollen ankles are amusingly elephantine?" The cruel accuracy of Ananya's prediction sent a shiver down Serafina's spine. Julian had in fact made a similar comment about her slightly swollen fingers just last week when she'd struggled to remove her engagement ring. "Looks like we'll need to resize that rock, darling. Or perhaps you're just retaining water like a camel preparing for a desert trek." He'd chuckled. She hadn't. "I don't know what to do," Serafina whispered, feeling a chasm of despair open before her. The life she had thought was a fairy tale was revealing its dark, thorny undergrowth. "For now," Ananya said, her voice firm but kind, "you document. Every dismissive comment, every time he mocks you, every time he makes you feel insignificant. Write it down. Date it. Not for him, but for you. So you have a clear record of what's happening. So you don't let him gaslight you into believing it's all in your head or that you're the one who's too sensitive." The suggestion was startling, yet it resonated with a nascent part of Serafina that was tired of feeling like a punchline. Documenting it felt like acknowledging the reality of her pain, a small act of defiance in the face of Julian's relentless mockery. The laughter was no longer just background noise. It was becoming the soundtrack to her growing disillusionment, and Ananya's words were a warning siren she could no longer ignore. The baby moon at Amangiri was, as Ananya had predicted, less about connection and more about curated perfection for an unseen audience. Julian spent most of his time on conference calls, occasionally emerging from their luxurious suite to take a few artfully composed photos of Serafina by the starkly beautiful desert landscape. He'd instruct her to look serene, to smile like you're actually enjoying this. His tone implying her visible fatigue and underlying sadness were an inconvenience to his vision. One evening, Serafina had a particularly intense craving for something incredibly specific and humble. A simple bowl of congee, the comforting rice porridge her mother used to make when she was sick. It was a craving born of a deep emotional need for comfort and familiarity, a yearning for a simpler, more nurturing time. When she mentioned it to Julian, he was in the middle of a video call with his European team, pacing their private terrace overlooking the vast canyons. He muted the call, an impatient frown etching his handsome features. "Congi Serafina, we are at one of the most exclusive resorts in the world with a menu curated by a world-class chef. They have pan-seared foie gras, truffle risotto, A5 Wagyu, and you want rice porridge?" He let out an exasperated sigh. "Can't you just order something normal, something befitting this place?" "It's what I want, Julian," she said. Her voice quiet but firm. "It's a comfort food." "Comfort?" He scoffed, then unmuted his call. "Apologies, team, domestic crisis. My pregnant wife believes she's in a rural Asian village instead of a 5-star desert oasis. The quest for peasant food continues." He smirked at his screen, clearly expecting appreciative chuckles from his colleagues on the other side of the world. The casual cruelty of his words broadcast to his international team struck Serafina with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just about Congi anymore. It was about her heritage, her identity being reduced to a punchline for his amusement. Humiliation, cold and sharp, washed over her. She turned and walked back into the suite, her body trembling. Later that night, while Julian slept soundly beside her, Serafina experienced sharp cramping pains. Panic seized her. She lay there for a few moments, frozen by fear, before a particularly intense wave of pain made her gasp. "Julian," she whispered, shaking his arm. "Julian, wake up. Something's wrong." He mumbled, swatting her hand away. "Go back to sleep, Sophie. You probably just ate something that disagreed with you. All those strange combinations. No, Julian, it's pain. Real pain," she insisted, her voice rising in panic. I think we need to call a doctor." He finally propped himself up on an elbow, blinking at her with undisguised annoyance. "A doctor at 2 a.m. For what indigestion? Serafina, you're being dramatic. It's probably just Braxton Hicks. Read one of those pregnancy books I bought you." "It's not Braxton Hicks," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "It's different. Please, Julian. I'm scared." He sighed, a sound of profound irritation. "Fine. I'll call the resort doctor in the morning if you're still scared. Now let me sleep. I have a 7 a.m. call with Tokyo." He rolled over, presenting her with his indifferent back. Fear, stark and terrifying, mingled with a chilling clarity. He didn't care. Her pain, her fear for their child was an inconvenience. She was utterly alone. Serafina, fighting through waves of pain and despair, managed to find the resort's emergency number on the hotel directory. She explained her symptoms to the operator, her voice shaking. Within 15 minutes, a doctor arrived at their suite. Julian, disturbed by the knock, finally sat up, looking more irritated than concerned. The doctor, a kind, middle-aged woman, examined Serafina quickly and efficiently. Her expression grew serious. "You're experiencing premature contractions, Mrs. Thorne, and your blood pressure is alarmingly high. We need to get you to a hospital. The nearest one with a proper neonatal unit is in Kanab, about an hour and a half away." Julian, now fully awake, looked aghast, but Serafina suspected it was more at the disruption and potential scandal than genuine concern for her or the baby. "A hospital? Is that really necessary? Can't you just give her something here?" The doctor fixed him with a steely gaze. "Mr. Thorne, your wife's condition is serious. Stress can be a significant factor in situations like this. She needs immediate medical attention." Her unspoken accusation hung heavy in the air. The ambulance ride was a blur of fear and pain for Serafina. Julian followed in a resort car on the phone most of the time, presumably rearranging his schedule and managing the fallout. At the small rural hospital, Serafina was given medication to stop the contractions and monitor her blood pressure. The baby thankfully was stable, but the doctors warned her that she needed to avoid stress at all costs. She was to be on strict bed rest for the foreseeable future. Julian, when he finally appeared by her bedside, looked harried. "Well, this is a fine mess, Serafina. My entire week is ruined. All those meetings. And bed rest. How are you going to manage the preparations for the baby shower Portia has been meticulously planning at the country club?" Serafina stared at him, a cold, hard anger solidifying within her. Not a word about her fear, not a question about the baby's well-being beyond the initial diagnosis, just complaints about his inconvenience and the disruption to their social calendar. "The baby shower," she said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion, "is cancelled. And Julian, I think it's time we had a serious conversation about our marriage." He waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't be so melodramatic, Serafina. You're just emotional because of this episode. You'll feel better once you're back in Boston in our own home with proper care." But something had irrevocably broken that night. His laughter, his mockery, his profound selfishness had almost cost her their child. The gilded cage had become a dangerous trap. A few days later, back in their Boston penthouse, confined to her bed, Serafina felt a strange sense of detachment. Julian was mostly absent, immersed in his work, leaving her in the care of nurses he'd hired. Portia handled all communication, her manner brisk and impersonal. It was during one of these long, quiet afternoons, idly browse on Julian's tablet, which he'd carelessly left on her nightstand, that Serafina stumbled upon something. She hadn't been looking for anything in particular, perhaps just a distraction. But a notification popped up from a secure messaging app she didn't recognize. Curious, she tapped on it. The app required a passcode, but Julian, in his arrogance, often used predictable codes. She tried their anniversary. No. His birthday. No. Then she tried the ticker symbol for Thorn Industries. Success. The messages that unfolded before her eyes made her blood run cold. They weren't business communications. They were intimate, flirtatious, and deeply incriminating exchanges between Julian and a woman named Chloe. Chloe Serafina vaguely recalled was a junior analyst at one of their competitors' firms. Someone Julian had dismissed as barely competent, but amusingly ambitious. The messages spanned months, starting well before Serafina's pregnancy. There were discussions of clandestine meetings, shared jokes at Serafina's expense. Chloe had apparently found Julian's imitations of Serafina's cravings hilarious, and plans for a future that clearly didn't include Serafina or their child. One message from Julian stood out, sent just a week before their baby moon. "S is getting more demanding with this pregnancy, almost unbearable. The sooner this is over, the better. Then we can finally have our real trip C. No talk of nurseries or nausea, just you and me in the Maldives." The betrayal was a physical shock, winding her more than the premature contractions. His mockery wasn't just casual cruelty. It was a symptom of his deceit, a way to create distance, to perhaps even justify his affair in his own mind, by painting her as ridiculous and unreasonable. The laughter she had endured now sounded utterly sinister in her memory. The pain was immense, a raw, jagged wound. But beneath it, something else flickered to life, a cold, burning rage. And with it, a steely resolve. He hadn't just laughed at her cravings. He had laughed at her at their marriage, at their unborn child. Ananya's words echoed in her mind. Document everything. With trembling hands, Serafina began to take screenshots. Every message, every damning photo Chloe had sent Julian, every callous remark he'd made about his pregnant wife. The peasant food comment was there relayed to Chloe with added embellishments. Julian's irritation about the hospital visit was detailed with no hint of concern, only annoyance. He hadn't just dismissed her, he had actively deceived and betrayed her. The truth, ugly and devastating, was finally out, and Serafina knew with a chilling certainty that she wouldn't just be fighting for her well-being or her child's anymore. She would be fighting for justice. His laughter would stop. She would make sure of it. The weeks that followed were a blur of enforced bed rest and quiet, methodical planning. Outwardly, Serafina maintained a fragile composure whenever Julian was present, which was infrequent. He'd breeze in, ask perfunctory questions about her health, perhaps touch her belly with a detached air, and then retreat to his study or leave for urgent business. He attributed her subdued nature to her condition, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. Her primary companions were the nurses, rotating in shifts, and Ananya, who became her rock, her confidant, and her co-conspirator. After Serafina tearfully revealed Julian's affair and showed her the trove of messages, Ananya's reaction was a quiet fury that mirrored Serafina's own. The arrogant, deceitful pig! Ananya seethed, her usual composure cracking. He deserves everything that's coming to him, Sarah, and we're going to make sure he gets it. The first step was finding the right lawyer. Ananya, with her legal connections, researched meticulously. They needed someone formidable, someone who wouldn't be intimidated by Julian Thorne's wealth and influence, someone who specialized in high-net-worth divorces and wasn't afraid to play hardball. They found her in Ms. Eleanor Vance, a legendary Boston divorce attorney, known for her razor-sharp intellect, her discreet tenacity, and her impressive track record of dismantling narcissistic millionaire husbands. Her firm, Vance & Associates, had a reputation for leaving no stone unturned. The initial consultation with Miss Vance took place via a secure video call arranged by Ananya. Serafina, propped up in bed, felt a surge of anxiety, but also a flicker of empowerment. Ms. Vance was in her late 50s, her silver hair impeccably styled, her gaze direct and unnervingly perceptive. She listened patiently as Serafina, her voice occasionally trembling, but her resolve clear, recounted the story, the dismissiveness, the mockery of her cravings, the emotional neglect, the terrifying night in Utah, and finally the devastating discovery of the affair. She then shared the screenshots of Julian's messages with Chloe. Ms. Vance absorbed it all, her expression neutral, but her eyes missing nothing. Mrs. Thorne, she began, her voice calm and authoritative. Thank you for sharing this. What you've described is not just marital dissatisfaction. It's a pattern of emotional abuse exacerbated by infidelity and gross negligence regarding your health during a vulnerable time. The messages with this Chloe are particularly damning, especially his comments about you and the pregnancy. They paint a very clear picture of his character and his priorities. He thinks I'm just being hormonal overly sensitive, Serafina said, the old shame flickering. A common tactic used by men like your husband to invalidate their partner's legitimate feelings and experiences, Ms. Vance stated coolly. We will not let that narrative stand. Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state, not a community property state. This means the marital assets will be divided fairly, though not necessarily 50-50. His conduct particularly, the affair and the emotional distress caused, can certainly be factored into negotiations, especially concerning spousal support and potentially other considerations. "What about the baby?" Serafina asked, her hand instinctively going to her swollen abdomen. "I want full custody. I don't want my child exposed to his toxicity." "Custody will be determined based on the best interests of the child," Ms. Vance explained. "His behavior, particularly his disregard for your well-being during the pregnancy complications, will be highly relevant. We will build a strong case. However, be prepared, Julian Thorne will fight. Men like him don't relinquish control easily." Over the next few weeks, under Ms. Vance's guidance, Serafina began to gather more evidence. Ananya, acting as her discreet operative on the outside, helped retrieve financial documents Julian had stored in their shared cloud. Statements from offshore accounts. Serafina hadn't known existed details of shell corporations and lavish expenditures on gifts and trips that clearly weren't for her. It appeared Julian was not only a philanderer, but was also potentially hiding assets, possibly in anticipation of a day like this, or perhaps just as a matter of course, for a man of his immense and somewhat shadowy wealth. Serafina also kept a detailed journal, as Ananya had initially suggested documenting every interaction with Julian, every dismissive comment, every instance of his emotional absence. She noted his complete lack of interest in prenatal classes. He'd scoffed at the idea, saying, "I pay people to handle such things." His failure to attend crucial doctor's appointments, always a last-minute unavoidable meeting, and his continued jokes about her changing body even after the scare in Utah. He'd once patted her swollen belly and said, "Quite the little tenant in there, Sophie. Hope it inherits my ambition and your punctuality at least. You were always good at being on time for dinner." The barb, implying she was good for little else, was duly recorded. The real-life reference that kept coming to mind, a symbol of his casual disregard, was a specific antique Fabergé egg music box that had belonged to Serafina's grandmother. It played a lullaby her grandmother used to sing. Early in the pregnancy, Serafina had brought it out, hoping it would be something they could share a future heirloom for their child. Julian had glanced at it and remarked, "Quaint but rather dusty, isn't it? We can get something far more valuable from Asprey or Cartier for the nursery, something that actually appreciates in value." He didn't understand sentimental value, only monetary. This small, exquisitely crafted piece became a poignant symbol of everything he couldn't or wouldn't comprehend about her. Ms. Vance also hired a discreet private investigator, a former FBI agent named Marcus Thorne. No relation, a detail that brought a grim smile to Serafina's face, to gather more information on Chloe and to monitor Julian's activities. Marcus was efficient and thorough. He uncovered evidence of Julian's lavish spending on Chloe, a rented apartment in Back Bay, expensive jewelry from Shreve Crump, and low weekend trips Serafina had been told were business conferences. The weight of Julian's deceit was suffocating, but with each piece of evidence, Serafina felt a strange sense of empowerment. She was no longer a victim cowering in a gilded cage. She was an architect, carefully constructing the case that would bring Julian Thorne's world of lies crashing down. The plan was to serve Julian with the divorce papers and a summons to court precisely 1 week before the lavish baby shower he still incredibly expected to proceed. Portia had, despite Serafina's earlier declaration, continued with the arrangements under Julian's instruction. He saw it as a crucial networking opportunity, a chance to display his happy family man persona. "He's planning to make a speech," Portia had informed Serafina, her voice devoid of any emotion about family values and the joy of impending fatherhood. Serafina had merely nodded a cold smile, playing on her lips. His speech would indeed be memorable, just not in the way he imagined. Ms. Vance advised Serafina to transfer a significant sum, her premarital savings and some funds from a joint account she still had access to, into a new separate account in her name only. For your immediate security and legal fees, Serafina. Once he's served, he will likely try to freeze assets. The day before the papers were to be served, Serafina looked at her reflection. The pregnancy had changed her body rounder, softer. But her eyes held a new hardness, a glint of steel that hadn't been there before. She was no longer just Serafina, the accommodating wife. She was Serafina, the mother-to-be, fighting for her child's future and her own dignity. Julian, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware, occasionally patting her stomach and making comments like, "Nearly there, Sophie. Soon you can get back to your old self, and we can get back to our old life." "Our old life is over, Julian," she thought, cradling her belly. "You just don't know it yet." The architect of his downfall was about to unveil her masterpiece. The morning air in the penthouse was thick with an artificial calm. Julian, dressed in a perfectly tailored Xenia suit, was on a call pacing the length of the enormous living room, barking orders about a hostile takeover bid Thorne Industries was orchestrating. He exuded an air of supreme confidence, the master of his universe. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off the city below, a kingdom he believed was his to command. Serafina watched him from the doorway of her bedroom, leaning slightly against the frame for support. Her obstetrician had allowed her limited mobility around the apartment, a small freedom she cherished. Today was the day. Ms. Vance had arranged for the process server to arrive at precisely 10:00 a.m. It was currently 9:52 a.m. Ananya had stayed over the previous night, a silent pillar of support in the guest suite. She now stood beside Serafina, her hand resting reassuringly on her arm. "Ready?" Ananya whispered. Serafina took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on Julian. "As I'll ever be." Julian ended his call with a triumphant, "Make it happen. No excuses." He turned, catching sight of Serafina and Ananya. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face at seeing Ananya. He'd never warmed to his sister-in-law's penetrating gaze. "Morning, Serafina. Ananya," he said, his tone clipped. "Portia is confirming the final numbers for the shower on Saturday. Over 300 guests. Senator Billingham just RSVP'd. It's going to be quite the event." He smiled a self-satisfied smirk. "Good for the brand, you know. The family man image." "I'm sure it will be memorable," Serafina replied, her voice even. Just then the intercom buzzed. Julian frowned. "Expecting anyone, Portia?" he called out towards his study, where his assistant was already at work. Portia's voice came back slightly tinny through the speaker. "No, Mr. Thorne. Shall I send them away?" "No, let them up," Serafina said, her voice carrying a newfound authority that made Julian raise an eyebrow. "I'm expecting someone." A moment of silence, then Portia confirmed. "Very well, Mrs. Thorne." Julian looked at Serafina, a hint of suspicion dawning in his eyes. "Expecting someone who... Another one of your holistic healers, or perhaps a psychic to predict the baby's gender. I thought we agreed. Dr. Evans confirmed it's a boy." He chuckled, but the sound lacked its usual arrogant mirth. The elevator doors chimed softly, and a nondescript man in a suit stepped out carrying a leather briefcase. He exuded an air of quiet official purpose. "Julian Thorne," the man inquired, his gaze sweeping past Serafina and Ananya to fix on Julian. "Yes." Julian answered, his tone wary. "What is this about?" The man stepped forward and extended a thick official-looking envelope. "Mr. Julian Thorne, you have been served." Julian stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. He didn't reach for it. Served? Served with what? Is this some kind of joke? He looked at Serafina, his eyes narrowing. "Serafina, what is this? Why don't you open it and find out Julian?" Serafina said, her voice calm, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. The process server, professionally impassive, placed the envelope on a nearby marble console table when Julian made no move to take it. "You are hereby summoned to appear before the Suffolk Probate and Family Court. All relevant documents are enclosed. Good day, sir, madam." He nodded curtly and made his exit as silently as he had arrived. Julian slowly approached the envelope. His usually ruddy complexion had paled. With trembling fingers he picked it up and tore it open. As he read the first page, a petition for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, emotional abuse and adultery, his face went through a rapid series of transformations. Disbelief, confusion, then a dawning, horrified comprehension. "Divorce," he finally choked out, looking at Serafina, as if seeing her for the first time. "Are you insane? Divorce on what grounds?" He scanned the document frantically. "Emotional abuse, adultery. This is preposterous, slanderous. Is it Julian?" Serafina asked, her voice cool. "Or is it simply the truth you never thought I'd have the courage to confront? This Chloe person. It's a misunderstanding, a complete fabrication." He blustered, his voice rising. "She's just a colleague. You're hormonal. Serafina, you're not thinking clearly. We can talk about this. We don't need this." He gestured wildly at the papers. Ananya stepped forward slightly. "Oh, I think she's thinking more clearly than ever, Julian. And we have more than just fabrications. We have records, dates, times, locations, expensive gift receipts, intimate messages, your charming little comments about your pregnant wife's peasant food cravings relayed for Chloe's amusement." "Shall I go on?" Julian's face turned ashen. He looked from Ananya's steely gaze to Serafina's resolute expression. The arrogance, the unshakable confidence began to crumble, replaced by a desperate, cornered look. "Serafina, darling," he began, his voice suddenly softer, pleading. "Please, think about the baby. Think about our family, our reputation, Thorne Industries. This will be a disaster." "I am thinking about the baby, Julian," Serafina said, her voice unwavering. "I'm thinking about a future where my child isn't raised by a man who derides and deceives his mother. A future where my child learns about respect, not ridicule." She paused, then delivered the line she had been rehearsing in her mind for weeks. "You found my cravings so amusing, Julian. You laughed when I was at my most vulnerable. Well, now it's my turn." She allowed herself a small, cold smile. "And I'm laughing back with a court summons." The fight drained out of him. He sank onto one of their ridiculously expensive Italian sofas, the court papers slipping from his grasp and scattering onto the Persian rug. He looked utterly defeated, a hollow shell of the titan of industry he projected to the world. The penthouse, his castle, suddenly felt like the scene of his public dethronement. My lawyers will tear this apart," he mumbled, but there was no conviction in his voice. "I doubt it." Ms. Vance's voice suddenly cut through the room. Serafina and Ananya turned. Vance stood in the doorway, having entered quietly behind the process server, her presence radiating authority. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne. I am Eleanor Vance Seraphina's counsel, and I can assure you our case is meticulous and robust. Perhaps you should call your lawyers. I believe they'll have a busy day." Julian stared at Ms. Vance, then back at Seraphina, his eyes wide with a mixture of fury and dawning terror. The king of Thorne Industries, the man who laughed at everything he deemed beneath him, was finally face to face with a consequence he couldn't mock charm or buy his way out of. His laughter had finally irrevocably dit in his throat. The silence in the opulent room was deafening, broken only by the rustle of legal papers detailing the end of his reign. The ensuing weeks were a maelstrom of legal maneuvering depositions and frantic attempts by Julian's high-powered legal team, led by the notoriously aggressive Atticus Finchley, to discredit Seraphina and quash the mounting evidence. But Ms. Vance was always several steps ahead, calm and unyielding, presenting a meticulously constructed case brick by brick. Julian, stripped of his usual arrogance in the sterile environment of conference rooms and lawyers' offices, oscillated between blustering rage and pathetic attempts at reconciliation. He sent Seraphina extravagant floral arrangements, which she promptly donated to a women's shelter, and left tearful voicemails professing his undying love and blaming his indiscretions on stress and the pressures of business. He even tried to say his affair with Chloe was research, Ananya reported to Seraphina after one particularly grueling deposition, rolling her eyes. Apparently he was studying the vulnerabilities of a competitor. The man's capacity for self-deception is astounding. Seraphina, now heavily pregnant and under strict orders to remain as stress-free as possible, attended only the most crucial meetings, her presence a quiet but powerful reminder of what was at stake. Ms. Vance handled the brunt of the legal battles, her courtroom demeanor a masterclass in controlled aggression and incisive questioning. The media inevitably caught wind of the high-profile divorce. "Thorne versus Thorne Tech Titans Empire and Marriage on the Rocks," screamed the headlines. Julian, who had always meticulously curated his public image, was reportedly furious at the leaks, though Ms. Vance suspected his own camp might be strategically leaking certain details to paint him as the wronged party. One of the key pieces of evidence Ms. Vance presented was Julian's pattern of emotional abuse, specifically his mockery of Seraphina's pregnancy. She called upon medical experts who testified to the profound impact of stress and emotional neglect on pregnant women and their unborn children, referencing the incident in Utah. Nurses who had cared for Seraphina during her bed rest provided written affidavits detailing Julian's dismissive attitude and his rare perfunctory visits. The messages between Julian and Chloe were of course explosive. Chloe, when deposed, initially tried to downplay the relationship, but under Ms. Vance's relentless cross-examination, her composure crumbled. She admitted to the affair to ridiculing Seraphina with Julian, and most damningly to Julian promising her a future once he was unburdened by his marriage. It turned out Chloe had her own agenda. She had been systematically leaking Thorne Industries' confidential information to her own company using Julian's infatuation to her advantage. This revelation caused a secondary scandal, sending Thorne Industries' stock plummeting and adding another layer to Julian's rapidly unraveling world. His board of directors was rumored to be convening emergency meetings, but it was a seemingly small personal item that delivered one of the most poignant blows in the court proceedings, not for its monetary value, but for what it represented. Ms. Vance, during her examination of Julian regarding his assets and his understanding of his wife's emotional state, brought up Seraphina's grandmother's Fabergé egg music box. "Mr. Thorne." Miss Vance began, her tone deceptively mild. "Do you recall a small antique music box, an heirloom, belonging to Mrs. Thorne's grandmother, which she showed you early in her pregnancy?" Julian, looking haggard and ill-tempered on the stand, scoffed. "Vaguely. Some dusty old trinket, I believe. She has a penchant for such things." "A dusty old trinket," Miss Vance pressed. "Mrs. Thorne has testified that this music box holds immense sentimental value for her. It plays a lullaby her grandmother sang, and she had hoped to share it with your child. Do you recall her expressing this to you?" Julian shifted uncomfortably. "I may have. I don't recall the specifics. We were discussing acquisitions for the nursery. I suggested something more substantial. From a reputable jeweler. An investment." "An investment," Miss Vance repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "So the sentimental value, the connection to her family, to her past, to the future child, that was less important to you than its potential for financial appreciation." "I believe in providing the best," Julian retorted, his voice defensive. "Practicality over sentimentality. It's what's made me successful." "Indeed," Miss Vance said, her voice laced with irony. She then produced the music box, carefully placing it on the exhibit table. It looked small and delicate in the imposing courtroom. Mrs. Thorne, in her affidavit, mentioned that this music box, after you dismissed its value, was relegated to a storage unit, along with other items you deemed clutter when redesigning the penthouse prior to the pregnancy. Is that correct? Julian waved a dismissive hand. "My staff handle such domestic arrangements. I can't be expected to keep track of every knick-knack." Then came the twist. Serafina hadn't even fully anticipated, a testament to Miss Vance's thoroughness. "Mr. Thorne," Miss Vance continued, her gaze unwavering, "our investigators recently discovered that the contents of that particular storage unit, including this music box, were scheduled to be auctioned off last month due to non-payment of fees. Fees that were, according to the records, to be automatically paid from an account managed by your personal finance office. Can you explain why your wife's cherished family heirlooms were on the verge of being sold?" Julian looked genuinely stunned, a flicker of panic in his eyes. "Auctioned? That's impossible. There must be some mistake. An oversight." "An oversight, Mr. Thorne. Or another example of your profound disregard for anything that doesn't directly benefit you or your bottom line." Miss Vance paused, then delivered the final blow. "Fortunately, Mr. Thorne, we were able to intervene and retrieve these items, including this music box, before they were lost forever. It seems while you were busy investing in your mistress and attempting to hide assets offshore, you couldn't be bothered to ensure the safety of something that meant the world to your pregnant wife." The courtroom was silent. The image of the powerful Julian Thorne, so careless with his wife's heart and heritage that her grandmother's precious heirloom almost ended up on an auction block, was devastating. It wasn't about infidelity anymore, or even the mocking laughter. It was about a fundamental lack of humanity, a coldness that chilled everyone present. Finchley Julian's lawyer looked visibly uncomfortable, shuffling his papers and avoiding eye contact with his client. Julian stammered, I had no knowledge of this. Portia handles these bills. It must have been her error." But the damage was done. The Fabergé egg, small and unassuming, had become a powerful symbol of his neglect, a tangible piece of evidence showcasing the emotional wasteland of their marriage. It demonstrated a callousness that went beyond mere insensitivity. It was a quiet, damning indictment that resonated more profoundly than shouting matches or scandalous revelations of affairs. As Serafina listened, a sense of quiet vindication settled over her. This wasn't just about money or revenge. It was about exposing the truth of the man she had married, the man who had tried to diminish her until she was as small and insignificant as he clearly believed her to be. The laughter had long since stopped. Now only the grim reality of his character remained, laid bare for all to see. The court was not just a place of legal battle. It was becoming the stage for his ultimate public humiliation, orchestrated not by hysterics, but by carefully presented, undeniable truth. The trial, or rather the series of hearings and negotiations that constituted the unraveling of Julian and Serafina's marriage, dragged on for several more months. Julian's initial bluster gave way to a sullen, resentful compliance as the weight of evidence against him became undeniable. The revelations about Chloe's corporate espionage, triggered by the divorce proceedings, had a cascading effect on Thorne Industries. The board, facing shareholder revolts and plummeting stock prices, eventually pressured Julian to step down as CEO. His empire, built on aggressive tactics and an image of unshakable control, was crumbling. Ms. Vance, true to her reputation, was relentless. She systematically dismantled Julian's attempts to hide assets, her forensic accountants tracing convoluted trails to offshore accounts and shell corporations. The Fabergé music box incident, though minor in financial terms, had a significant psychological impact on the proceedings, subtly shifting perceptions and undermining Julian's credibility. Finally, facing overwhelming legal pressure and public disgrace, Julian agreed to a settlement. It was, by all accounts, exceptionally favorable to Serafina. She received a substantial portion of the marital assets, far more than Julian had initially offered, including the Boston penthouse, which she planned to sell. More importantly, she was granted full legal and primary physical custody of their child. Julian was given limited supervised visitation rights, contingent on him completing an anger management course and parenting classes. The day the divorce was finalized, Serafina was in the hospital. Just hours after the settlement was signed, she went into labor. Her son, healthy and beautiful, was born at dawn, his first cries heralding a new beginning. She named him Ethan, meaning strong and enduring. Ananya was by her side, tears of joy and relief streaming down her face. There were no calls from Julian, no flowers, no acknowledgement of his son's birth, beyond a curt message relayed through his lawyer, expressing his awareness of the event. It was a final, pathetic testament to his character. Serafina felt a pang, not of sadness for the loss of her marriage, but of pity for a man so consumed by his own ego that he couldn't see the profound joy he was missing. A few weeks later, Serafina, with baby Ethan cradled in her arms, stood in the now empty penthouse. The movers had taken the last of her belongings. The opulent space, once her gilded cage, felt cold and impersonal. She walked to the large windows looking out over the city. It was no longer Julian's kingdom. It was just a city full of possibilities. She thought of Julian's laughter, the sound that had once chipped away at her soul. It was silent now, placed by the gentle gurgles of her son. She had faced the mockery, the betrayal, the fear, and she had not only survived, but emerged stronger with the most precious gift of all. Ananya arrived carrying a box of Serafina's remaining personal items. Among them, nestled carefully in tissue paper, was the Fabergé music box. Serafina picked it up, its delicate craftsmanship cool beneath her fingers. She wound it gently, and the sweet, clear notes of her grandmother's lullaby filled the empty room. It was no longer a symbol of Julian's neglect, but a testament to her resilience, a connection to her past, and a promise to her future. "Ready to go?" Ananya asked, smiling. "More than ready." Serafina replied, her own smile radiant. They walked out of the penthouse, leaving behind the ghosts of a painful past. Serafina was moving into a charming brownstone in a quieter, family-friendly neighborhood, closer to Ananya. She planned to return to her career as an art curator, specializing in supporting emerging female artists. She would raise Ethan surrounded by love, honesty, and the gentle strength she had rediscovered within herself. Serafina's journey from a silenced wife to a triumphant mother is a powerful reminder that no one should endure ridicule and disrespect, especially during life's most vulnerable moments. Julian's laughter at her pregnancy cravings was a symptom of a much deeper betrayal. But Serafina found her voice and her strength, turning his mockery into her motivation for justice. Her story is one of resilience, the courage to fight back against emotional abuse, and the ultimate victory of truth and self-worth. If Serafina's story resonated with you, or if you've ever felt dismissed or unheard, please give this video a like and share it with others who might find strength in her journey. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories of truth transformation and the incredible power of the human spirit. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching.